Now let's look at semantic interoperability. As interest and need for exchange of data across the continuum of care and for research has occurred, the need for a standard vocabulary has arisen. But once again, it has been challenging to settle on only one standard. The International Classification of Diseases, or ICD, in various versions over the years, I've been involved in ICD 7, 8, 9, and 10, has been the choice for public reporting of mortality initially and then morbidity. It is managed by the World Health Organization, or WHO, and the U.S. has developed a clinical modification that is built off of the WHO edition but has been expanded for use in our reimbursement reporting. But of course, physicians have long used the American Medical Association's current procedural terminology, CPT, in various versions over the years for their reporting for reimbursement. So already we can't give up these two systems. Other terminologies have also been developed for and are widely used for specialty areas, and many of these have been adopted as standards by ONC for the Meaningful Use Incentive Program. Drugs and biologicals, for example, are named under the National Drug Codes, or NDC. These codes are universal product identifiers, created in part by the Food and Drug Administration and part by the pharmaceutical manufacturers. Drugs and their properties are also standardized in drug knowledge bases, most notably RxNorm, maintained by the Department of Veterans Affairs, but also several proprietary companies, the largest of which are First Data Bank, or FDB, Micromedics, and Multum. These drug knowledge bases support computerized provider order entry alerting in EHRs. Lab orders, test results, and other observations now utilize a relatively new vocabulary called the Logical Observations Identifiers, Names, and Codes, or LOINC system. LOINC was developed and is maintained by the Reagan Streif Institute out of Indianapolis, Indiana. LOINC, as we said before, also provides a comprehensive set of attachment type codes. Then there is SNOMED, which was originally the standardized nomenclature of pathology, SNOP, and was developed by the College of American Pathologists, CAP, and used by pathologists. This grew into the standardized nomenclature of medicine, or SNOMED, and is now an official vocabulary standard managed by SNOMED International, based in Denmark, but for which tools for use continue to be developed and sold by the College of American Pathologists. SNOMED is one of the vocabularies required in the Meaningful Use program and has special utility in focused applications, such as infection control, where SNOMED-coded elements from multiple computer applications can come together to alert infection control nurse, for example, to potential hospital-acquired infections. Although not a part of the Meaningful Use program, there are as many as a dozen nursing terminologies, many of which can be used with SNOMED and sold through the College of American Pathologists SNOMED tools. Other terminologies have also been developed for other purposes. Some are very specific, such as for immunizations and race ethnicity descriptions, and have been required in certain federal reporting programs. Others have held promise but are proprietary. One in particular, MedSyn, is offered by Medicomp Systems Incorporated. It has grown from being a widely respected vocabulary that supports data entry in a language commonly used by physicians to what now is a utility utilized in a number of ambulatory EHRs designed to correlate relevant clinical information at the point of care and provide narrative reports from the data. And just as an aside, a utility is software that helps analyze, configure, optimize, and maintain the computer or its database structures, in contrast to application software that supports users performing tasks such as to enter and retrieve data. Now, there are some semantics associated with semantic interoperability. Our last discussion indirectly recognized that there are standard vocabularies and non-standard vocabularies. There are quite a few nuances to semantic interoperability, which has led to something of a less than standardized set of standards. Even the terms vocabulary, terminology, and nomenclature are used interchangeably. Be that as it may, a standard vocabulary, by definition, is one that is controlled by a standards development organization that maintains it and adheres to certain requirements for receiving input into the standards development process by all affected stakeholders in an open, voluntary, and unbiased manner. SNOMED International, as I said before, is an example of a standards development organization for medical vocabulary. However, the federal government can deem a vocabulary to be a standard, such as the American Medical Association's proprietary CPT is considered a standard vocabulary, and the World Health Organization's International Classification of Disease and our clinical modification is also deemed to be a standardized vocabulary. Controlled vocabulary is another term often associated with semantic interoperability. Standards vocabularies are controlled by the standards development organizations, but most proprietary vocabularies, that is, term sets that are produced by a vendor, for profit usually, these are often controlled by their owner, but it is possible that they may accept any term submitted to it, and so then is less than a standard. And therefore, medicine, which is very well respected in the industry and widely used in physician EHR systems, has not been adopted by the federal government as a standard. Now, in addition to words and their meanings, vocabularies also may have a coding structure and or a classification structure. Codes represent terms or concepts in machine processable form. Terms may be coded by a person, such as in ICD and CPT, but terms may also be encoded by a computer, such as SNOMED, which essentially is never coded by a person. So, for example, I may have a diagnosis of a specific condition, chronic obstructive lung disease. SNOMED takes that term set of words and codes it automatically. A classification groups terms or concepts into categories for statistics, reimbursement, and other purposes. And certainly ICD or ICD-10 CM is an example. The ultimate goal of semantic interoperability should be to code, C-O-D-E as an abbreviation, to capture clinically specific data once at the point of care and derive information therefrom for every other purpose. Capture once, derive every. Code. As standards were adopted for EHRs, both ICD in whatever version and SNOMED were evaluated for this purpose. However, neither are vocabularies that always reflect the language of the provider and certainly not the patient. Rather, a combination of lay terms such as mole for what actually may be one of several different types of skin lesions, all with formal names, and general clinical terms like breast cancer instead of adenocarcinoma of the breast may be used instead. In this case, it is necessary to utilize a map or crosswalk to standardize reporting and other communications. The National Library of Medicine, or NLM, has done extensive work on mapping healthcare vocabularies to SNOMED and among some of the vocabularies independently. Hence, a lab order in LOINC used by a lab, for example, can be automatically converted to a CPT code for physician billing. The federal government also has the General Equivalence Mappings, or GEMS, that provides a translation dictionary to bridge the language gap between ICD-9 CM and ICD-10 CM. In addition, vendors may use proprietary dictionaries of terms that have been mapped to ICD and or SNOMED. An important consideration in mapping, however, is how accurate the map can be. Even with the best techniques, a one-to-many or many-to-one mapping requirement will never result in perfect mapping. In other words, one terminology may be extremely granular by nature, often the example given is SNOMED, and another terminology less so granular. ICD-10 was significantly less than ICD-9 CM was significantly less granular than SNOMED. ICD-10 CM is somewhat less granular, but is approaching the same granularity level as SNOMED. The purpose of the mapping and the structures being mapped determine how well the mapping can be performed. Still, mapping has an important place in both transitioning to ICD-10, as we've done very successfully in the end, and in utilizing the code sets in an EHR, which is really the bigger challenge right now and for us as we consider using these to achieve interoperability, common meaning as we share across providers and with health plans in value-based care.